In the FY22 budget, the government had rolled out the 2 lakh crore PLI schemes for 14 sectors. How have these schemes performed so far? And also, what have the impact been of government schemes over the last 5 years? Joining us to talk about this all is the DPIIT Secretary, Rajesh Kumar Singh. Mr. Singh, thank you very much for joining us. 2 lakh crore was the overall outlay of the PLI schemes for 14 sectors. How much has been disbursed so far?
So the incentives so far cumulatively is about 5,500 crores that have been disbursed. But that isn't the nature of the scheme because the incentives are meant to be disbursed at the back end. The incentives are only 5,000 crores. The amount of investment that has come in so far is almost 1,06,000 odd crores. Incremental sales so far, the sales so far under the PLI scheme is about 9 lakh crores. Exports are about 3 lakh crores. So yes, the scheme has had a big impact across these 14 odd sectors. More so in certain sectors like mobiles, mobile manufacturing, electronics, food processing, pharma. These are the areas which have moved faster. There are others which are where they are in the gestation period. So we might see some more traction there in the coming years, like white goods and automobiles, solar modules. In textiles and steel, there is some tweaking required perhaps to ensure that these lead to higher subscription and faster growth.
There has been a tepid response to schemes such as the IT hardware, auto components, textiles, ACC battery storage sectors. What more needs to be done, and what are some of the gaps that you've seen which has led to lack of interest?
Well, of course, you have to do a sectoral deep dive to get into the specifics of what a particular, scheme might have or might require in terms of, improvements, flexibility, etc. But in general, in certain cases, flexibility requirements, including change in product lines, expanding the definition, increasing the tenure of the scheme, and in certain cases, lack of subscription. Due to lack of appetite in the market, which we hope will change once we carry out these tweaks that I've mentioned.
Which are some of the sectors where new PLI schemes could be launched?
Well, I mean, as of now, the intention is that we focus on completing these existing PLI schemes well, which is these 14 sectors across 10 departments. Overall, as I mentioned earlier, the response has been quite good. It has been quite transformational in some sectors, particularly in sectors like pharma, medical devices, electronics and mobile manufacturing, to a great extent even food processing, where there's a lot of interest across the country, particularly from MSMEs. So yeah, I mean, it's at least the majority of the schemes have probably seen very good response. White goods is another one which has seen a very good response.
We believe that the incentive SOPs are yet to be rolled out. There has been a delay in disbursement of incentives as well. Only 3 or 4 companies have so far qualified for the DBA criteria. Any tweaks that the government is considering in order to make sure that the disbursements can be faster, maybe on a quarterly basis, and more companies can qualify faster?
Yes, you're right. I mean, in the sense that there have been some cases where the claims made have, led to certain queries being raised about the quality of the paperwork and all that. And that has created some discomfort, and therefore, maybe in certain cases, the processing has not been as fast as it ought to be. The government and the beneficiaries have to work together to ensure that that process improves. What government is hoping to do in the future is to increasingly create a situation where quarterly disbursement of incentives takes place. We are also looking deeply at the SOP itself and trying to ensure simplification where required. And finally, on the specific issue of the auto PLI, my understanding is that several companies in different categories have now met the investment threshold. The SOP will hopefully follow shortly, but I don't think the incentive claims as such have started coming in there. And I don't think the SOP will prevent us from meeting those incentive claims. In the case of white goods, which is done directly by DPIIT, we rolled out the entire disbursement for the current year, about 65 crores. We actually released about 71 crores on the basis of the claims made. So it's not it's something that we are closely tracking, and we intend to ensure that business gets the incentives that it has claim to in a reasonably quick fashion. Incentives claims being disbursed on a quarterly basis is something we are working on, because we have found that in those PLI schemes where the incentive claims were given on a quarterly basis, generally the claim disbursal cycle was a little faster and better. So we would advise all departments to try and adopt that. On the issue of DVA norms, etc., the DVA norms is relevant in some schemes. It is not relevant in others. It's particularly relevant in automobiles, for example, also in white goods. The norms are not particularly difficult, but in certain cases they need tweaking. For example, in the case of white goods, we had to make some clarificatory changes in the definition to ensure that business did not find any constraints, and that has been quite successful. In the case of automobiles, I don't think the DVA as such is so much of an issue. It is a question of of companies being able to rise to that threshold.
What is your expected outcome on further capex deployment by industries due to PLI schemes in FY25 and going forward?
So when these proposals went before the government, the cumulative investment that was being targeted was about 3 lakh crores. So we've achieved about 1/3 of what we set out to do. In 9 out of the 14 sectors, the investment targets so far have either been already met or exceeded, particularly in areas like electronics, mobile manufacturing, pharma, etc. In many others also, the yearly target so far has been met. There are a few which are a little behind. Other targets, or rather projections that were made, were in areas like employment, in terms of overall sales, etc. All those are frankly on track right now in a cumulative fashion, even though in terms of individual schemes there are ups and downs among them. So broadly, I would say again that investments are on target, sales are on target, and even employment generation largely is on target based on the original projections that were made. Target up to 22-23 for employment was 4,25,000 odd employment. What was achieved in up to 22-23 was 3,66,000 employment. For the 23-24 period, the target was 1,91,000 jobs, out of which till December, and we, of course, 3 months, we've just now ended the financial year, but I have figures only up till December. Till December, the figure achieved against the target of 191 was 1,27,000 employment. The cumulative achievement is 4,93,492 against the cumulative employment projection of about 30 lakh. So even that is cumulatively on track, but there are shortfalls or overachievement in certain sectors.
Okay. Shifting focus to some of the recent schemes which have been launched by the DPIIT, starting with a new EV manufacturing policy to give duty concessions to companies which make a certain investment commitment to the country. Now, this policy has been notified. What has been the kind of response you've seen over the last few weeks since the policy was notified?
I think what we've seen is that the government has tried to kind of thread the needle here in terms of ensuring that all stakeholders are consulted, and we take a view in the public interest in rolling out a policy that is not specific to any particular enterprise or company. And it tries to sort of balance the interests of all the stakeholders. I think the response overall across industry has been positive. I don't think there has been much of a backlash or worry about this policy causing any kind of disruption.
So, but there has been a lot of word about Tesla setting up shop, and we hear there could be an announcement soon. Are you confident about them as a company? Because this duty reduction for a limited period of time was one of their key demands.
I would only say that the policy has been well received by all quarters, including the companies that are outside, as well as many of the companies inside India who initially may have had reservations. Most of them have at the end of it, now that the policy has seen the light of the day and now that they've seen the details, most of them have accepted and welcomed the policy, including, both those who are not present here and those who are already present here.
Right. I'd like to ask you, will there be any kind of threshold or criteria as to where you can actually import from? For example, if a company which is making an investment commitment wants to import from its plant in China, can they do so?
We haven't, see, as of now, there is no, restriction on import from China per se. You would have seen BYD vehicles are already on the road after paying the relevant, import duties. So we've not, the only restriction that exists in India is on the investment side, where we have Press Note 3 and we have a restriction on land border countries. So yeah, FDI from that area is difficult. Imports from that area is theoretically possible under the present regime. Whether we'll necessarily keep it that way, I can't take a call. But as of now, under our existing policies and regulations, imports, there is no restriction on imports as such.
The BJP government has completed 10 years in power. If we were to ask you about the next 10 years, according to you, which sectors are you most bullish about and which you think will really drive the investment and the private capex cycle, according to you?
DPIIT, focuses on manufacturing by its very nature. We are very bullish about manufacturing growing fast now, finally achieving its potential in India. We've been growing at double-digit plus growth rates in the last 2 quarters continuously. There is significant capacity utilization and private capital formation is going to sort of increase. Our consumer penetration rate, whether it is in e-vehicles, whether it is refrigerators and air conditioners, all of those are very, very low by global standards. So in all of these areas, in electronics, in mobiles, in white goods, in pharma, in all of these areas, you're going to continue to see sustained double-digit growth, which will hopefully propel India's share of manufacturing in its GDP up from the very stagnant kind of position that it has been over the last few decades.
And that will be the push of DPIIT as well, manufacturing as much as we can.
Yes, that is our most important sort of goal right now, to really propel manufacturing, create high-quality jobs and exports for our country.
Right. So thank you so much for speaking to us.
Hello and welcome to this CNBC TV 18 special, and today we are joined by Pharma Secretary Arunish Chawla. Recently, this department came out with a very detailed and much awaited code on pharma marketing practices. A very warm welcome to our show, sir. How the government is ensuring that this code is adhered to?
The Uniform Marketing Code for Pharmaceutical Companies 2024 was notified 1 month ago. The pharma associations are the first point of stop for implementing the code. And this is based on what is called a model of cooperative compliance, as most ethical codes are. The pharma associations essentially include the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, which is the association of the biggest 25 pharma companies which are Indian. The OPPI, which is a similar association for multinational pharma companies which are operating in India. The third big association is the IDMA, the Indian Drugs Manufacturers Association, which is a large association of 1,100 medium, small drug manufacturers all over the country. And the fourth is the Bulk Drug Manufacturers Association, which is an agglomeration of about 300 bulk drug manufacturers in the country. Put together, they account for about 1,300 to 1,400 pharmaceutical companies operating in India. Parallelly, we have collected market data from the market footprints of companies over the last 3 to 4 years, we've made a list of 1,300 pharma companies which are marketing their drugs and their products in the Indian market. Today's meeting was called at the end of the financial close, which is on 1st April. And going forward, as you know, all the companies have to give their undertakings over the next 2 months. We are preparing a panel of auditors. The previous code that you mentioned was voluntary. It was a pilot experiment. It led to learning. You know, when you bring in an ethical code of conduct, an entire industrial culture has to change. It has to evolve. That takes time. And this is a very dynamic process. The industry is undergoing a very fast transformation. The new code is mandatory. It is not voluntary. Why it is mandatory is because there is a government oversight. There is a risk-based audit. There is a self-certification. And there is a redressal mechanism. In addition to that, some people will ask whether it is statutory and non-statutory. The answer to that question is this is quasi-statutory.
If the code is not adhered to, what is the penal action?
Section 12 of the code has 5 different subparagraphs. When we write a code, we look at the target audience. The code is written in a simple language so that a medical representative, an ordinary health practitioner can very easily understand in simple English what they can do, what they cannot do. Those who are implementing the code and government agencies read the same thing differently. If you go through the code carefully, it mentions certain statutes very clearly and explicitly. It mentions the advertising practices. It mentions the Income Tax Act. It mentions the MCI regulations, loud and clear. What is, if you ask me, this is game theoretic, but I'll put it in very simple words. A reputational play is the best defense against unethical market practices. And that is what the courts tried to achieve.
If a particular company does not adhere to the code and is found flouting the norms, this department is going to publicize it in public through social media and various other platforms. Is that what you're hinting at?
Loud and clear, and we will not stop at that.
So name and shame is the idea of the penal action over here?
Name and shame is where it begins. The story will go further. We will wait till the end of May for every company to submit their undertaking. We've already made a list of 1,300 companies. We have picked up a panel of auditors from the CAG empaneled auditors. Those who do not give undertaking will automatically go on a risk-based audit framework. When there are violations of different code statutes, some mentioned herein and some not mentioned herein, the Department of Pharmaceuticals will bring in those government agencies and those authorities, including those statutes and laws which are relevant to that context.
Pricing of drugs has been very crucial. It impacts everyone, not just in India, but globally. Drugs and medical devices have to be made available 24/7 at an affordable price. So what is this committee all about? What is going to be the entire idea of the government with this new committee under your chairmanship? Just your comments on that.
The old pricing framework was evolved in 2012 and 13. It is now 10 years old. Any new legal framework that is evolved has to be given time to, come to its own. And while that is done, the industry evolves. and the industry changes structurally. In the last 8-10 years, the drugs and medical device industry have undergone a huge change. The older code, the older control order, was essentially designed for drugs alone. It was not designed for medical devices.
Yes.
Medical devices is a sunrise industry in India. It is now growing year on year at a double-digit rate. For ordered growth of that industry, and it is imperative that the control orders and the pricing framework recognizes the structural differences between drugs and medical devices. There were demands from the industry that a lot has changed in the last 10 years, and therefore, in light of new realities and in light of a fast growth of a star industry, which is now called the pharmacy of the world, we need to look at the framework and modernize it with time. That is why this committee was constituted. The committee has started its deliberations. All stakeholders, all associations, including the healthcare customers and the users, health providers, they will be consulted, and on the basis of that, we'll go forward. I'm afraid I will not be able to divulge more details.
Whether the drugs and medical devices will be made more affordable in the country or not with this new pricing mechanism. Your word on that.
You have to read the terms of reference carefully. The terms of reference mention that there will be an availability, affordability framework for critical drugs and essential drugs. There will be a price moderation framework for medical devices that makes medical devices affordable while at the same time providing incentives for industry to grow. It will look at new drug therapies, high cost, high margin treatments, which are the treatments of the future, which are coming into the market. It will also reorganize the National Pharmaceutical Authority to cater to the demands of a fast-changing industry.
Pharma has been one of the most attractive areas across the 14 sectors of PLI which were announced by the government. Your views, your comments, how has been the offtake so far?
We should celebrate the moment. Pharma PLIs have been a resounding success. 3 PLIs schemes have been rolled out in the sector, covering pharmaceuticals, bulk drugs, and medical devices. The pharmaceutical scheme has exceeded all expectations. Already 25,000 crore plus of investment has come in, and production targets have been exceeded. Exports have ballooned. And in the closing year, the Indian pharma industry exported more than 50% of its output. Now, that is a big landmark. The bulk drugs and medical devices are difficult schemes, and they have succeeded. Greenfield plants have come up in India, and 50 of them were inaugurated the last month in a nationwide, widely televised inauguration ceremony. And that happened. With that happening, a lot of energy came in, and 50 greenfield plants actually started working and started producing bulk drugs and medical devices, which hitherto were entirely imported in the country. Last but not the least, it is very important to look at independent data. In the meditech sector, in the medical devices, for the first time, the imports came down in absolute terms. For the first time ever. And exports are growing double digit. That is the best independent evidence that PLI schemes have been a resounding success.
My last question to you, your word to manufacturers, to the pharma industry, to vaccine manufacturers, and to doctors especially, that what should be the future of this particular industry in India? What is the vision for next 5 years?
Take off is the word. India has arrived, and India pharma and meditech industry will be the star of the future, and you will see India shining on the global stage.